Welcome to the complete battery comparison between the brand new Huawei Mate 30 Pro, iPhone 11 Pro Max, iPhone 11 Pro, iPhone 11, and the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus. First things first, let's get them to the same brightness level. So I've opened up a white page and used a luxometer to measure the amount of light emitted. I've put all phones on the same settings, and now we've done that, it's time to remove the chargers and start the timer on the far right. And the first application we're going to do is Instagram, because as always, we're going to try and simulate a fairly day-to-day scenario. Right off the bat, a few things to note. If you look at the specs below the Mate 30 Pro, one in particular might stand out. It's got a 4,500 mAh battery, and you might know if you watch a lot of these tests, that's big. Almost more interestingly though, the iPhone 11 Pro Max has nearly 4,000 mAh, and yes, that's not as big as the Huawei, but at the same time, in every test I've done, iPhones have always been very efficient with the battery they do have, and so, given that this is such a large capacity, by far the largest Apple has ever used on a phone, it'll be interesting. So we're about 40 minutes into the test, and we've finished with Instagram. We're now on an application called the History of Everything, standard education app, and you can see the Note is behind for now, but it's looking like the iPhone 11 is not too far in front of it. One thing worth bearing in mind about the Note is that, like the Huawei, it has a massive battery capacity. It's got 4,300 mAh, but a couple of factors that perhaps put it a little bit behind on paper. The Note has a 6.8-inch display, which in terms of area is actually quite significantly more than any other phone here, and it's running on Samsung's One UI skin, which is a beautiful bit of software on top of Android, but in terms of battery management, it's not as aggressive as either of the four phones it's up against. That said, if we take a look at the battery percentages on top, the Note has already overtaken the iPhone 11 next to it. It's looking about on par with the iPhone 11 Pro so far, but the Pro Max and Huawei's Mate 30 Pro, they look like they're in a league of their own. Let's talk about resolution for a second, because we've got quite a weird set of phones in terms of it, and generally speaking, more pixels is going to drain more battery. The reason I say it's weird is that apart from the Samsung, which is just set to Full HD+, none of the other four phones actually use a standard mainstream resolution. The Mate 30 Pro and the iPhone 11 Pro, they're pretty close to 1080p, but they're just a little bit higher. The iPhone 11, the base model, is lower than 1080p, and the 11 Pro Max is higher. It's the highest resolution phone out of all of them. Now, the Note 10 Plus does have a Quad HD Plus display, but because out the box it comes set at 1080p, and because that's what 95% of people are going to stick with, that's what I'm using for this test. So, you might have noticed in the background of this, the iPhone 11 has slipped behind. It's on 62% after just over 2 hours, and it's a full 10 percentage points behind the Note 10 Plus and the iPhone 11 Pro. We've just finished some camera recording of standard video, 4K video, and slow motion video, and now we're moving on to gaming, starting with something pretty light and working our way up to more intensive titles. This gaming process, it takes much more out of the iPhone 11 than it does the other four phones, and I've got a few theories. There's the obvious stuff, like compared to the Pro, its battery is a little smaller and its screen a little bit larger, but that can't be the full story, otherwise it wouldn't be so far behind the Pro. What I'm thinking is that this primarily boils down to display technology. Whilst the Pro phones are using OLED displays, the standard 11 is using an LCD, which in itself has the potential to suck more power, but there could be more than that. It could be that the iPhone 11 doesn't have as good a cooling system as the Pro variants. That would also potentially lead to more power drawn. Every phone here is a next to brand new unit, so there's no chance for batteries to degrade, and they're all on the same settings. They've all got Wi-Fi, NFC, Bluetooth, and location on, as well as being on 50% volume, so it's gotta be an internal factor. That said, we're now creeping up to the 4-hour mark, and providing a phone lasts 5 hours in a test like this, that's good battery life, that's respectable battery that you're not going to need to worry about for a while, so we might still get there. I actually had to double take at this point when I realized that, yes, we are approaching the 4-hour mark, and yes, the Mate 30 Pro and 11 Pro Max, those things are on well over 50%. I don't think I've seen battery life like this since the Pixel 3a XL. You may or may not have realized, but we're actually in a really interesting position when it comes to looking at the chipsets of each of these phones, because these are phones from Huawei, Apple, and Samsung, the only three smartphone companies that actually have their own smartphone chipsets. And so, in a way, this actually further amps up the stakes of this battle. You've got Huawei, Apple, and Samsung's top-tier flagship phones using their latest and greatest silicon, and it's all being pitched together in this battery comparison. After about an hour on YouTube Music, the iPhone 11 finally calls it a day, but to be fair, it has lasted more than 5 hours, so I'm happy. The next closest phone is the Note 10 Plus with 29%. Anyways, time for Afterpulse, which is a super underrated first-person shooter game, and the graphics on here are some of the best you can see on a phone, full stop, I think. Also, in case you missed it, I'm running an iPhone 11 giveaway with everything Apple Pro. All the rules are in the description. Now, I feel like one question I haven't answered properly yet, the US ban on Huawei. You've probably heard about it. You've probably heard of how Huawei is unable to do business with Google, and that means there's no Google apps on this phone. Yes and no. From all the units we've seen so far, yeah, none of them have Google Play Store or Google Maps or anything like that on them. But two things. First of all, it seems like Huawei is pretty confident that this will blow over and that the situation will eventually sort itself out. And the second thing, as you can probably tell, you can sideload them. It took me about 5 minutes. I'll leave a link in the description if you're curious, but you just download an app and that downloads the Google Play services for you. And so you still can have full access. Just as I say that, you can see the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus has called it a day, and from this point, we've pretty much seen what we need to see, so I'm just going to fully fast forward this test, and let's get to the final results. There was a bit of Google Chrome, a bit of YouTube, and one final game, and I did somehow manage to kill all these phones, although, let me tell you, this was the longest time I've ever spent filming a battery comparison. Anyways, in 5th place, the iPhone 11 with 5 hours and 2 minutes. This is what I'd call good battery life. Next up was the Galaxy Note 10 Plus, way ahead at 6 hours and 31, already in the great category. The iPhone 11 Pro was even better than this, but what makes that more surprising is that this is such a compact device. But then, the Mate 30 Pro got 8 hours and 13 minutes. That's staggering. That's the second best phone I've ever tried. But then, the iPhone 11 Pro Max takes the full title. This is the best battery I've ever tried on a phone, and it completely came out of nowhere. I always did wonder what would happen to iPhone's battery life if Apple actually put a large battery inside, and you can see for yourself it's pretty great. Anyways, thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, a sub would be amazing, and there's tons more smartphone coverage of these phones and other devices, plus a couple of secret ones coming very soon, so do stay tuned for that. I'll catch you in the next one.